All right, Tom Giordano Show. Big issues, big guests. Right in the center of the action, Congressman Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, who is the chair or the leader of the House Freedom Caucus. Scott Perry, Congressman, welcome back on a big day. Thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Of course, it's a big day. Unfortunately, I can't say it's a good day for America. Look, we can't pay our bills, and to pay our bills, we're borrowing more money. With this bill, we're giving the president an open-ended checkbook for essentially 2 years to the end of his term to do whatever he wants to and spend as much money as he wants to. And I just don't see that as the answer, especially in an age of hyperinflation. People can't afford gasoline. The housing prices are through the roof. Groceries. Try and buy a car now. I mean, you get trucks out there over $100,000. I mean, does any of this ever end? It doesn't look like it right now.
Well, I trust you, and you're in the center of it, and you're the leader of the Freedom Caucus, but we have a lot of other voices, even people like Newt Gingrich, who say this is the first step. Massey from Libertarian Conservative from Kentucky voted on the rules. I'm not sure how he's going to vote today, but he said this gets us
He's
back.
He's going to vote yes, I think.
Yeah, this gets us back to regular order. So, look, I'm fascinated by it, by people I really respect and who are knowledgeable, are at odds on this. And that's why it concerns me. But also, I'm interested to see why you think guys like this see it differently. What is it that you are different from them on?
Well, they're believing, look, I've read the bill. We've run the numbers on it. Maybe they haven't read it all. I know in the case of Thomas Massey, who's a good friend of mine, we like him on the Rules Committee. But look, he voted to not allow any amendments. We don't think that's appropriate, and that's something that Thomas usually would vote against. So I don't know what his calculation was there. That's the days of Pelosi and Paul Ryan doing that kind of stuff. That's number one. Number two, he might have voted, look, he wants what's called an auto continuing resolution, whereby if we don't pass our appropriations bills, it automatically kicks in at a lower number. So it's say like 99%. That's what the government's funded at 99%. Unfortunately, this is neither auto or really, well, it does say at 99%, but it doesn't happen at the end of the fiscal year. So there's nothing to bind us to that. There's nothing making that happen. And I guarantee you that save some crisis, there's no way you could get the votes for that, because this town historically, there's always a coalition to spend more money. Mm-hmm. And that coalition is always greater than the one that doesn't want to spend as much money. And we get rolled every single year. And so it's not automatic. We have to vote on it. And it happens in December, or actually in January. So the fiscal year runs to the end of September. That's when the federal government has to either, decide to spend more money, or we get into one of these government shutdown things. The end of September. This auto CR, so-called, doesn't happen until January. Well, what happens in those 3 intervening months? Well, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, because we've seen it 100 times. The what we call the defense hawk, the people that want to plus up defense, are going to side with the leftists that want to just spend more money on social programs. And they're going to create a huge coalition of money spenders. And they're going to say, this is the bill that we're going to force to the floor because we got 218 votes. And the Senate will pass something like that, and there'll be no savings. It's not going to happen.
Okay, well, let me ask you, and I hate to put it in this, because this is with you, the respect we have for you, particularly what you said about the military, and I trust you on that. If we don't go down this path, if Republicans like you don't vote for this at this point, it still appears the bill will pass. And are you in the camp, if that happens, with that much Democrat support, to say this is potentially very, very difficult for Kevin McCarthy's leadership?
Well, it certainly is not good. Like, we voted for a Republican speaker, not for a Democrat speaker. Now, I don't know what the Democrat votes are going to be, but there is a potential for there to be more Democrat votes than Republican votes. So that's not a very good sign, obviously. Look, I didn't say any of this was easy, but it seems to me that right now we're going to put people on record for voting for the largest debt ceiling increase in history. Right? It's indefined. There's no limit to it. There is no limit. It's just as much money as can be spent, until 2025. So for what? What did we get for that? Well, I will tell you, it seems to me that the Democrats have about 4 trillion plus reasons to vote for it because it doesn't change any of their policies. And Republicans, the only thing we got out of it, I guess, is saying that we didn't let ourselves go over the cliff. The problem with that is, Dom, is that we passed a bill not to go over the cliff over a month ago that was responsible and actually would save money. But we didn't fix the IRS. We didn't fix the student loan.
Let me stop you there. What happened on the IRS too? This was the centerpiece, the war cry, the rallying cry. And on that, I'm in agreement with you. This is very, very little done on those 87,000 agents.
Yeah. So last year they passed a bill called the Inflation Reduction Act. It didn't do anything to reduce inflation, obviously, but that's what they called it. And it included $80 billion in advance appropriation. So that's like, we're just going to put $80 billion in your checking account. That's on top of their normal money, which I think is $8 or $9 billion a year to operate. So we gave them $80 billion last fall, right? And in this deal, we claw back $1.4 billion. So that leaves them, by my math, I'm not a calculus major, but with $78.6 billion to spend. Now, some are saying that just keeps them from hiring people this year. But it seems to me that they can still hire people with $78.6 billion to spend. And at the end of the 10-year window for this $80 billion, they're going to have $1.4 billion less. Well, that doesn't stop anything today.
What's your theory, or what can you tell us then when we have people, again, that I respect, have on over the years, and they say, given everything, this was not only the best you could do, but Gingrich has said it's playing chess, and it's a movement forward in Washington. And I guess they're not, I have to say, I'm glad to see people are not firing at you. Certainly are staying above the fray. You're not firing wildly at McCarthy or Gingrich or anybody else, but they're saying, given the reality of where we are with only one branch of government, this is decent.
It's not decent, and it belies the fact that we had changed the trajectory in Washington, D.C. since January, and if we would have just stayed on course, we don't know what kind of deal we would have gotten. And here's why we don't know why. Because the Senate has failed to vote on anything. Sooner or later, I know that they negotiated this with the president, but the president doesn't doesn't vote on anything. He signs something. It still has to be passed by the Senate. The Senate has been absent without leave. They haven't shown up at work. They don't have any language. They don't have any bill text. They haven't voted on any bill. They haven't had a hearing on this. They haven't dealt with it at all. And so we don't know what kind of deal we could have gotten, because this is what we know. The Senate and President Biden said, well, we want to raise taxes, but they can't vote. They can't get a bill out that does that. They said, we want a clean debt ceiling, but they can't get a bill out that does that. They can say they want a lot of things, but we have to live in the world of reality. And the reality is all the things they wanted, they couldn't pass. But somehow they negotiated from a position as though they could pass them. And of course, since we were the only ones that passed the bill, as soon as we started negotiating, we were immediately negotiating against our own position.
That is a great point. That is a great point. That's I agree with you. That happened here. On one other matter, and I know time, and I really appreciate how generous you are with it. We're just seeing on Fox News that Representative Comer talked with the FBI director on the Biden matter, that he would be held in contempt for if he doesn't produce the document or documents. What's your thought on what's happening with that?
Well, he absolutely needs to be put into contempt. These are not Christopher Wray's documents. They are not the FBI's documents. These are documents about the truth and potentially about evidence that belong to the American people. This is their government. It's not the FBI's government. And so with all due respect, at least at a minimum, those documents should be available to the representatives of the people. I mean, quite honestly, I think they should just be shown to the people. Sure, we want to secure methods and sources, as we always like to say, but the FBI, and look, these aren't even classified. They're not classified documents. So America needs to know what's in these documents. And quite honestly, I believe that the chairman has already seen a copy of the document. He just doesn't, he's not able to hold it in his hand. But you can't introduce evidence into any body of any investigative body if you just, reciting it from what you think you read off the top of your head. That's not going to work. And so the fact that Christopher Wray does not want to provide this information is exceptionally troubling. And of course, this comes from the administration and the party that always says no one is above the law. They say it all the time. As soon as one Republican is arrested for standing on a sidewalk and preaching about abortion or going to a school board meeting, no one is above the law except for their people that they want to protect. Their people are above the law, and apparently so is Christopher Wray.
Congressman, thank you. I want to get you out on time, but thank you very, very much for breaking this down from your position. Thank you.
Well, God bless you and your audience. For sure appreciate you. Let's stay tuned and see what happens here. Thank you.
Representative Scott Perry. And Dan, I find this, aside from the consequence in this for listeners, boiling it down, what does it mean to all of us? I find it fascinating because you have Massey, libertarian, conservative. I've heard him on with Rich. I don't think I've ever had him on. Who clearly is thinking this is the right course. Gingrich, others, Jim Jordan. And yet we have the head of the Freedom Caucus, Scott Perry, telling us all this does is give them $4 trillion more dollars. Essentially, that's where he is. He's not firing away at McCarthy, but he's pointing out the downside of this. We hope Jeff Van Drew will be on. I think he's voting for it. We'll see at about 2:15. Phone lines, though. Give me your response to that. 855-839-1210. You get in. That and reparations math. Can you imagine this coming? And this is how they do it. They just send it in individual teachers and departments, math departments. Just do it. They don't tell the school board or anything. Don't you think you ought to know if this nonsense based on the big lie is in your school? That ought to be hashed out at the school board level. Maybe they ought to hear experts on this telling them, are you serious? The revolutionary, that's what fuels all this stuff, the big lie. Here on Talk Radio 1210.